Okay, we are going to have a quick review of the demand side analysis. We started off with stating the law of demand, which is essentially an inverse relation between price of a given good or service, for that matter, and the quantity demanded. This is deliberately, this phrase quantity demanded is a deliberate phrase indicating that we are looking at the relationship between price of a good and how much of that particular good is demanded by consumers at different prices. And these two are inversely related, meaning that higher prices will lead to lower quantity demanded, and lower prices will lead to higher quantity demanded. In order to convert this statement into a graphical representation, we have a two-dimensional graph with quantity of the good measured on the horizontal axis and the price of the same good. Very important, remember, it is the price of the same good on the vertical axis. So at P1, let's say $8, when you trace it to the demand curve, consumers are buying, let's say, 10 units. And when we drop the price to, let's say, $6, the consumers buy 14 units. And so if we connect these 2 points and anywhere in between, we end up with our demand curve reflecting different quantities demanded as the price changes. And of course here, as the price drops, quantity demanded will increase, and as the price increases, quantity demanded will decrease, and that is the inverse relationship. Then we raise the question as to if there are other product factors that influence the decision to purchase, and the answer is obviously yes. Price is one of them. So we say quantity demanded for a product like X, it depends or is a function of its own price, price of substitutes, meaning the price of goods that compete with it, sometimes extremely close substitutes and sometimes distant substitutes, but nonetheless consumers could consider those in case the price of the product has increased significantly. And then we also consider the price of complement goods. These are goods and services that one has to have in order to make the consumption of, let's say, good X possible. If good X, for example, is automobile, then gasoline price is a price of complement good, and so therefore how much gasoline prices changes will impact the demand for automobile. And then of course we have thrown in there the impact of income, and then we left it open because there are other variables that may also impact the demand for product X, such as advertisement expenditure, promotions, government regulations, a whole host of things, temperature, climate, political atmosphere, etc., etc. All of those can impact a decision to purchase a certain product or not. And the idea here again is, as we have said before, if the price of the product rises, quantity demanded will shrink, and we've shown that along this curve, and by the same token, when the price of the product drops, quantity demanded will increase. So you go from this point to this point on the price, and then the quantity demanded along this curve goes from this point to this point, so therefore an increase in quantity demanded. Price of substitutes are interesting. If the price of substitutes go down, our consumers will switch away from the product like X into the substitute good. So it is not the price of the good X that has changed, but the price of a product that it competes with. So we hold the price constant as it is, and because the substitute is cheaper, some of these customers walk away to the other product, so that at price P1 smaller quantities sold, and at price P2 also smaller quantities sold. So if we connect these 2 points, we end up with a new demand curve, which is smaller or to the left of the previous one. In this case, we say change in demand. This is in contrast with the change in quantity demanded. 2 just only signifies the difference. The only big difference is that in the case of price of the good itself fluctuating, you move up and down the existing curve to different quantities. When price of, let's say, subsugar good changes, while the price of the product has remained constant, so we hold this price constant and we see what happens to the market for this particular product. So by that same token, if competition raises its price, we get some of their customers attracted to the product in question, X, and so therefore without price of the X changing, more is demanded everywhere, and so that you end up with a new demand curve, which reflects an increase in demand and existing price. And then we have complement goods, and the way they work out is that if the price of complement goods increase, it makes the consumption of good X more expensive, so people buy less of X because what they need to consume it with is expensive and the package is more expensive as a result, so demand shrinks. And by the same token, if the price of the complement good drops, then the whole package becomes less expensive and the demand for this product X will increase to the right. And so, and for that matter, if income is increased, holding everything else constant, the demand shifts to the right. If income of average households buying this product has decreased, then the demand shifts to the left. And so therefore the key thing to remember is that when the price of the product itself changes, you move along the existing curve, and everything else, if they change, they must be handled by shifting the curve to the right or to the left, increase or decrease in demand. Then up to this point is theoretical consideration, and then we need to quantify this conversation, and that leads us to the question of demand elasticity. With respect to the price of the product is defined as percentage change in quantity demanded for a good X when there is some percentage change in price of the good X. And here visually, to understand, let's say in this case we have a P1, and that is generating Q1 demand, quantity demanded. When we raise the price, let's say by 10%, that leads to smaller quantity demanded from Q1 to Q2. However, if you can see that we have increased the price here by 10%, however, reduction in quantity demanded was predicted by the law of demand. However, in terms of the magnitude, you can tell that it's less than 10%. If that's the case, when the price has gone up by 10%, but the quantity demanded that is shrunk is, let's say, 5%, then this number would be, by definition, if you divide these two, would be by definition less than 1 in absolute numbers, and by absolute we mean we ignore the sign because it will be always in opposite direction, and therefore we call it inelastic because the value is less than 1. Compare with this alternative, we have raised the price again by 10%, but in this case quantity demanded has dropped maybe by 25%. So if we divide 25% by 10%, you get the value that is 2.5 in absolute terms, and that is clearly more than 1, greater than 1. And so in that sense we call this an elastic demand. This is extremely important information because price elasticity will determine as to whether it makes sense to raise prices or not, and then can perhaps perhaps calculate the anticipated change in sales in a positive or negative direction. In this case, because consumers are not extremely price sensitive, if you raise the price, you don't lose many customers, and you can benefit from this move because total revenue is price times quantity. So you raise price, some small change in quantity, but overall increase in price outweighs the loss of sales, and total revenue will be higher. Now, by contrast, if you drop the price, sales will not boost significantly, so the loss of revenue through reduction in price is not compensated by increase in sales. And so therefore, when consumers are price inelastic, raising a price makes sense to generate more revenue, but dropping the price doesn't. Now let's compare this with this scenario. Once again, we raise the price by 10%, but then reduction in quantity demanded is significant, by 25%. In this case, we said that this is an elastic demand curve. And does it make sense to, in this case, does it make sense to raise price because the loss of sales is by far greater than gain in price? However, it does make sense to lower the price, because in that case, it really boosts sales very significantly, and so therefore revenue will be improved. This price elasticity is particularly important when we are trying to figure out how to price a product, what would be potential benefits or gain as consumers will react to the price change. We also know that majority of the medical care products fall under inelastic demand curve for a host of reasons, because for one thing, if people have insurance, they are less price sensitive, but even if they don't have insurance, medical care is one of those that is very different from beef or chicken or fish or strawberries or raspberries. This sometimes impacts the quality of life in significant ways, so therefore people have to make bigger sacrifices to make sure that they purchase or consume medical care, as opposed to, let's say, an entertainment or certain cut of meat for dinner. So this distinction or understanding of elasticity is very, very important. And finally, to wrap this conversation up, we talked about the consumer behavior theory, and the sort of foundation of this idea is based on the law of diminishing marginal utility, which essentially states that as more of a product is consumed, the additional satisfaction or utility drawn from it will be smaller and smaller, and at some point it will be no change, and if you continue, the consumption may in fact be producing negative utility or satisfaction. So as we go from 0 to 1, there is a growth in utility, and you measure it here, and this would be marginal utility of 1 unit consumed. And then if you consume 2 units, there will be additional marginal utility. Let's say in this case, if this was, let's say, 20 units, here is 15, so marginal utility of 2 is 15 utiles. Utile is, let's say, imaginary unit of measuring someone's happiness with or satisfaction with the consumption of a product. And then if we add another unit of this product to the consumption package, then utility will rise again, but by less amount. So this might be only 5, and if we consume 1 more unit, it contributes no more to the overall satisfaction. And if we lost sight of it and consumed even 1 more unit, then utility could actually be harmed. Why is it this important? Because that effectively identifies how human, or for that matter living species, relate to consumption of food, clothing, nutrients, entertainment, whatever it is that sustains them, knowing that they will not be delighted or happy with the consumption of product indefinitely, and this phenomena is in effect. In fact, if it was not in effect, it would confuse all of us as to what is the right amount of any product to consume before you switch to some alternative. And so this utility function will tell us that as we consume more, marginal utility declines, and that is the foundation for the demand curve. As you consume more of a product, let's say Q1 to Q2, the Q2 level gives you less satisfaction than when you're at Q1, and so for that matter, the only way you're willing to increase your consumption of a product is that if you are compensated with the lower prices to justify it. And that is again the justification for downward sloping demand curve. Should every level of this product to produce higher level of satisfaction or utility, then your willingness to consume this product will enhance even at a given price. So therefore we hold the price constant, say, here, because you heard some good news about this product, you're willing to purchase and consume larger quantity of it, and the demand shifts to the right. So therefore the new demand curve is associated with improved utility for the product. And by the same token, if the utility of the product is declined for whatever reason, then people walk away from the product and the demand will shrink. This topic is particularly important to analyze and understand consumers with respect to goods and services that they consume. Now, one important thing is that this is relevant to medical care. Well, the medical care, like all other products, you have multiple choices. Now let's go back to this, say, everyday products you buy. Let's say fish versus beef versus pork or chicken. You have had them all, you know what they produce in terms of satisfaction. So this is a marginal utility of beef, given the price of beef. Then there's a marginal utility of, let's say, poultry, given the price of poultry, and there's a marginal utility of, let's say, fish or seafood, given the price of fish or seafood. And the idea here is that you know what these products are, you've had them before, you know how they satisfy your taste and desire and so forth, and you compare the benefit you get and compare that to the cost that you have to incur, which is the price you pay, and then you make sure that they're all in balance, meaning that if something that gives you more satisfaction, then your willingness to pay higher prices for it will increase and bring it into the harmony or back into the ratio that existed before. And so for that matter, this relationship has to hold by and large, and if that's the case, meaning that you basically look at all the choices you have and you buy any one of them based on the sacrifice you must make relative to its price and compared to the other product and the utility that they generate relative to the price, and then you keep all in balance, making sure that you're not buying certain products at a high price that you happen not to like. You could have used the money to buy something else instead. And when by and large you try to achieve this balance between all your choices and so forth, we call that efficiency in consumption. However, let's see if this idea can be applied to medical care. You may have a condition that needs certain treatment, and let's say there are 3 different possibilities. So each one of those possibilities has costs and benefits. So marginal utility of, let's say, procedure 1, given the cost or price of procedure 1, and then you compare that with marginal utility of procedure 2 given the price of procedure 2, and then marginal utility of procedure 3 given the price of procedure 3. And similar to the above case, you will look and see what benefits you get if you accepted or went through with the procedure 1 given the price that you must sacrifice, and then you make sure that a similar balance exists in this situation. Now, however, when it comes to beef or poultry or fish, over majority of people have a clear idea of what they do in terms of the satisfaction and utility they generate. You can see the prices in the marketplace, and then you can make this comparison to be reasonably efficient in terms of your selections and so forth. When it comes to medical care, there is asymmetry of information and knowledge and ability to process information. So therefore, typical, perhaps overwhelmingly number of population will not be able to clearly formulate their opinion and desire for any of these procedures, even if they are explained to them in great detail. They just simply do not understand the depth of it. And then, so therefore, people cannot clearly formulate in their head what do they get in result if they went through with procedure 1, 2, or 3. So this cannot be formulated for extremely high level of percentage of the population. Now, if you add to this complexity the fact that people don't see the prices to even begin to do a check and balance and see if they want to make certain choices. So therefore, even though this idea may be a reasonable one when it comes to selection of goods and services in the marketplace, at the grocery store and whatnot, when it comes to the medical care, is not functional. It's just not relevant, in fact. So that suggests that whole idea of trying to instill greater price mechanism into the healthcare as a way of driving rational choice for consumption of medical care is essentially theoretically and practically flawed. It cannot be functional because of these advantages that people have with respect to formulating their utility function for medical care services, let alone that they don't see prices on top of that. So this idea will not work. It may be at the very margin of it, it might work. Consumer satisfaction, patient satisfaction surveys and so forth may nudge some group of patients away from one hospital to another that competes with them and so forth, but that's extremely limited in value in terms of whether you could build a medical care system around the typical price mechanism that is used in the marketplace for all other goods.